Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's so good of you to join me here today. So today I want to take the time to discuss a very important issue or very important topic that we've discussed several times on this channel, and that is the issue of demographics. Now I've done several videos discussing US demographics, Russia's demographics, and kind of playing around with the different population pyramids of several other countries, one of which includes China. So for the first time since 1961, China has experienced a demographic decline, which means that the population in China has decreased. So, what does this mean, and what is different between now versus 1961? So, in 1961, China was going through one of the years of the Great Leap Forward, which is a collectivization policy where the state under Mao's China came in and collectivized farms. Collectivization is the process of nationalizing the agriculture or the food supply in order to create an economies of scale. And the idea is simple. If you own the land and you produce at scale, that you be able to produce more food than if you let individuals do it on their own level. Now, anybody who's ever worked in agriculture knows that's pretty stupid. And the reason it's pretty stupid is because fundamentally nobody knows how to work any piece of land better, and nobody has more vested interest than individual landowners and farmers. And anybody that's worked in agriculture will tell you this. And every piece of land and every single like every single thing in a ranch takes a lot of effort, or in a farm takes a lot of effort for honestly not a whole lot of reward. So when you try to collectivize at the scales that they did, of course, China ran into the same problem that the Soviet Union did about 30 years earlier, and you essentially create a famine. Now, in that instance, about the estimates say between 15 and 50 million people died, and that created the conditions for the demographic decline that they saw back then. This time, it's a little bit different. One of the major drivers of this demographic decline, of course, is similar but a little bit different, and this has to do with China's policy over the last 3 years. China has had one of the most strictest COVID lockdown policies in the world. And as a result of the lockdowns during the pandemic, a lot of people that would have normally met and had families and all this other stuff that would have contributed to a increase in the population just did not happen, because how could you go out and meet people or start families or do any of these things when you can't even go out of your house or go out very far to do anything? So this was expected because, again, when you have policies that prevent people from living their normal lives, of course, abnormal things are going to happen. Now, the question is this going to be similar to 1961, where you had a small dip in the population and then everything just like skyrockets forward, or is this going to be a continuous trend? Now, every indicator says that this might be a continuous trend, as we can see here. But again, I don't like to take projections and say that this is exactly what it's going to be, because you always have to take projections with a grain of salt. And the reason for that is because, again, if you were to go back to the 1960s and you're going to say, one day China is going to be competing with the United States for superpower status. And in the 1990s, the Soviet Union is going to collapse in its entirety, so they're not going to be even an issue. And everybody would have laughed you out of the room, because nobody could have foreseen that future. If everybody could have foreseen that future, then we would have just should have sat back and never let Vietnam happen or any of the other conflicts that have happened during that time, right? But obviously that wasn't the thinking, right? And nobody looked at China, everybody looked at the Soviet Union, and here we are talking about China becoming the next global superpower. Of course, that is one of the consequences of population decline, is that when you do have population decline, you will lose that status. The positive of the population decline is the fact that now individual labor is valued more, so women can have a lot more negotiating power with employers and with the state to gain better maternity rights. And that could be a positive, of course, as listed here. There's a lot of other things that are being talked about here, of course, like the decline of China's economy, among other things that could happen. Of course, political instability that could result from this. And I will link the article down in the description for those of you that want to read it on your, after this video. The other thing too is of course, again, as I mentioned, is a demographic trap that's listed here on this website. And some of these articles are pretty negative about it. Of course, we always have to look at both sides. The negative side is, of course, you're going to have fewer people to produce, which means that if you have fewer people, the value of labor is going to go up. And if the value of labor is going to go up, then that means your overall economic competitiveness goes down, right? So because you have fewer people and you have fewer competitions for jobs, so people gain better job security. There's the positive and negative. And like I said, you always have to balance the two things, right? Because I think it's a positive thing that people are getting more economic rights to be able to demand higher wages, demand higher productivity, so on and so forth. Of course, the other side of this is, again, you're not going to be as competitive because you can't compete. It's going to be very difficult to compete with other nations like India, which at the same time, mentioned here, I believe, let me double check. Yeah, right here. India's population overtakes China to become world's biggest analyst estimates. An article here. And so it's going to be more difficult, and countries like India might actually leap ahead of you in the future, you know. And of course, if the United States can recover its demographics, it's also going to be better off. And remember, the United States has a higher overall per capita GDP than China. So every consumer that America can create fundamentally should theoretically be equal to X amount of consumers in China. I think it's like 5 or 6 or like some number of there. But you can fact check me in the comments if you want and let me know what the actual number is. But and by the way, before anybody gets upset, I use the word fact check to actually check the facts, not some political thing. But the upside of all of this, of course, is that China could potentially lead the world in automation, which it already does, right? So China, in just a few years, China has become the world's largest user of industrial robotics by a wide margin. In 2021, China accounted for 52% of global installation. So China is learning to compensate for a decreasing labor force by increasing the automation, right? So, you know, the use of robotics to create to promote growth, right? And that's an important factor to consider because, on the other hand, too, China is one of the world's leaders in STEM graduates, in engineers and scientists, along with India. And China and India are both massive when it comes to this because, again, they graduate a lot of scientists, they graduate a lot of engineers, and all the countries on this list that do produce that do also have a large population growth are going to be competitive going forward because you need scientists, you need engineers to build the technologies, to build the devices, and to manage the world as you see around you because, again, engineers and scientists make sure that all the technology that we have, everything from smartphones to the electric grid to your roads, are built right and that today's infrastructure and technology remains relevant. And then, of course, innovation on top of that. So you need engineers and scientists, and nobody produces more of those than China and India. So China might overcome these demographic declines because, well, again, as the demography decreases, but if automation and productivity in that sector increases, then of course that could overcompensate. And even if China's demography is decreasing, again, like in this article, right, China would still have, you know, in the worst case scenario here, I think that would be one of the projections here in the year 2100, about 700 to 800 million people, which is still a lot of people, right? But these would be people with higher incomes because again, if you sustain economic growth, but you have a shrinking population, then everybody gets a bigger slice of the pie than they previously would have, which could lead to investment and other growth and overcome the middle income trap. Will that happen? I don't know. Right? Again, like on this channel, I don't want to say like this is absolutely going to happen and you got to be absolutely certain. I just look at the contributing factors. The most likely scenario is that this population pyramid, this population decline, it doesn't go the way it's projected. Because again, if we're just taking a snapshot of China's demography and situation, like for example, like in 1961, like we have here, well, then you're going to get a very bad set of data. Now, everybody's been predicting that China's population will eventually decline. Maybe this is a little bit sooner than expected, maybe not. The big key difference is, can China use technology to overcompensate for demographic declines, similar to what the United States did in the 1980s and 1990s? Because every year after 1990, mid 1990s, the United States started seeing the demographic decline and a narrowing of the pyramid, for which it compensated by using with immigration and other policies to attract workers into the STEM fields and to other fields. And the United States has always been an immigration superpower. We really do drive a lot of immigration to the United States to create a very technologically capable workforce. Because again, in this pie that you see here, a lot of these engineers and scientists do take jobs in the United States to come here and to work here and to make their money here versus China or some of these other places. So that's a very important thing to take note of in the future as well. So you have a combination of all these factors. So the key going forward will be whether or not China's automation and technological innovation can outpace its demographic decline. Because again, good demographics can compensate for a lack of innovation, right? Because sometimes you can just throw people at the problem until the problem is solved. And that generally works when you have a lot of people to throw at the problem. Countries with a wide base at the population pyramid. Countries where that narrows again. The younger people that are in those economies gain better bargaining power and gain better economic status because, again, they can negotiate for better wages, better salaries, because their efforts and their productivity is more important, and there are fewer people to work the jobs that needed to work, right? And if you're like Japan, it could lead to years of stagnation and overall economic degradation. Question is now, what will China do going forward? Again, this is good and bad. The good is that it forces China to innovate and to seek other means and measures to create population growth. These measures generally should be progressive. They should include creating policies to do everything they can to make sure that people have kids, that people form families. On the other hand, this can be bad. This could be the start of a very slow and painful decline, similar to what we've seen in Japan, to a point where almost nobody's having kids, and and more people are buying adult diapers than they are buying kid diapers in the society, and that's also not good at all. Even though Japan is very technologically advanced and very industrialized, and nobody would ever say, well, Japan's a third world country. No, Japan is a very, very advanced country, and it is a very, very organized country. So those are the factors that are butting heads right now. Where we'll fall? I'd like to say that right now, it's hard to tell. And anybody that's going to go out there, and one of the reasons I make this video is kind of to let people know, anybody that tells you or thinks that they know the future is already like, they're almost always trying to sell you something, because I guarantee you nobody really knows what the future. Everybody has their predictions about the future, but nobody really knows. I mean, like, that's the thing. Right now, my whole point of this video is that right now it's a 50-50. China can innovate their way out of this, and those innovations and the growth of the economic pie and the fact that it is, like I said, it is a different society than us, that they could potentially turn this around, right? They did this in 1961 after a very, very openly, clearly failed collectivization effort, and correct the ship and become more powerful than ever. Or they could go the way of Japan, right? A society that creates just pretty much there's videos on the internet that discuss this, like what essentially happened in Japan, where Japan pretty much built out a bunch of failing businesses, didn't purge their society of bad management and bad leadership, and some of the things that have happened in society to lead to the decline that they saw in the 1990s. And as a result, you have a society that is just pretty much zombified. People aren't having kids because a lot of the things that should have happened in the 90s, which was a complete restructuring of the system, didn't happen. So there's a lot of stagnant forces in that society that prevent it from creating future growth on the economic scale. So what is that? So what it would mean for the future could be anybody's guess. And again, on that note, I'm just going to say, let me know what you think down in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this issue going forward? Let me know, and I'll talk to y'all later.